Good afternoon. Um, oh, we're up to 12 participants. That's not too bad. Um, welcome everybody. We have got about 15 booked in. We'll probably give them another minute or so. I'm notoriously impatient when it comes to this. So I sort of start the meeting and I go, if you're not here for 11 o'clock, we're starting. But people tell me I should be a tiny bit more patient and give people a little bit more time. So we'll do that. And then I'll jump on and do a very quick introduction for those of you that don't know us at Your IT, and then hand over to my colleague James, who's our Microsoft specialist. Or you've got modern work specialist today. You've got so many job titles, James.
Man of many hats.
Many, yeah, indeed, many talents as well. I think we've got a couple more joined. So yeah, we're up to 13. So we'll give it another 30 seconds. That's as much as I'll be able to stand, and then we'll get kicked off. Yeah, as Cornelius has just popped in the chat, is open. There's a Q&A as well, so you can pop your questions in as you go along. We'll try and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end as well. But yeah, do feel free to pop your names in the chat and say hello. Oh, Cornelius is joining us from Ghana, in international audience today. Right, that's it. I can't wait any longer. So I am terrible for this, but yeah, I mean, 3 minutes past 11. That's good enough for anybody. So hello, welcome to Stay Ahead of Your Competitors with Microsoft 365 Business Premium. My name's Craig Pearson. I'm head of sales and marketing at Your IT department. For those of you who are on the webinar who don't know who Your IT are, we're a managed apparently I don't know who we are either. We're a managed service provider. We're based in the East Midlands in the UK, and we provide IT support, cybersecurity, AI, and automation services to small and medium-sized businesses across the UK. We're a Microsoft partner, and we actually look after around 2,500 Microsoft licenses, which when I worked that out this morning, was quite a scary number. It seems an incredibly large amount. But that's what we do. So that's what puts us in a position to know a little bit about this subject matter. The reason that we wanted to put this on, we wanted the kind of there's two elements to it. So one is if businesses are looking at moving from a business basic or a business standard type license with Microsoft 365 to business premium, so they've got an idea of what they will get and how that works and what the value is for them as a business. But also if you've already got business premium licenses within your business, what you might be missing within that and what you could be utilizing, which potentially save you money, increase efficiency, and do all the things that we want it to. Some of you may also be here because of a LinkedIn post that I put out last week and we boosted that Microsoft are actually increasing pricing for both basic and standard, and not insignificantly either. So it's a 16.7% increase on business basic licensing and 12% on business standard. So they're actually bringing the pricing up of those lower level licenses more towards business premium, which we think just makes business premium an even better value proposition. So it wasn't around when we first decided to do this, but I think it makes it even more timely. So anyway, enough waffle from me. Let's pass you over to the expert who knows what he's talking about. James Graves, take it away.
Thanks very much, Craig. That's great. Pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you very much for taking the time out to come here and speak to us around Microsoft 365 Business Premium. Just to give a bit of background on myself, I'm James Graves, Modern Workplace Specialist, as that says. For those of you that don't know what Modern Workplace is, that's basically anything that sits in the realm of Microsoft 365 and the accompanying products that goes with that. So think of things like data protection, cybersecurity, compliancy, all that type of thing that sits in the Microsoft wheelhouse. That's kind of bread and butter, day-to-day stuff for me and my role. So I'm going to kick things off, just go over a brief agenda for you here now. And we're going to start off just by looking at some kind of top concerns for small and medium businesses, some trends and things like that we've come across, the benefits of Microsoft 365 Business Premium. We'll then delve into some real world scenarios, so how these products fix different scenarios, onto some additional security products that are available there, and then we'll discuss at the end some resources, some little value adds and takeaways, no matter which business license you're kind of in there. There's not so much any slides around that last piece, but we can just have a very interactive conversation, answer any questions, etc. at that stage for you. So I'm going to start off with those top concerns piece that we spoke about. And one of the top concerns that we come across repeatedly here is people's ability to secure their devices, secure their data, etc. So we're going to start with that as our topic piece here. And the reason we're doing that as well is because Business Premium carries a lot of feature and functionality that will allow you to support yourselves as a business with this sort of activity. So landscapes, just talking about some of the numbers and things like that in general when it comes to cybersecurity at the moment. So from a Microsoft perspective, and this is data that was generated during 2025, 34,000 full-time security engineers now exist at Microsoft across the world. So whether that be the ones that are based in the UK, Europe, the USA, so on and so forth. It's a significant team and a hell of a lot larger than a lot of the other competitor products, etc., that are out there to Microsoft Defender, for example. 1.6 million bot-driven or fake account signups were blocked by Microsoft every hour in 2025, which again is a mind-blowing kind of statistic there to think that there was that many attempted fake accounts being signed up at any particular one time. 5 billion emails are screened daily on average to protect users from malware and phishing attempts that come through the Microsoft products emailing system. So again, 5 billion emails every single day. Again, these are astronomical figures to look at. But the reason that I do like to mention all these numbers and things for people is because it kind of builds a little bit of a picture here of just how much data Microsoft has access to when it comes to cybersecurity. So all of these engineers, they've got all of these different data points they've got here in terms of these fake account signups, these emails that they're scanning, gives Microsoft an unprecedented picture of the cybersecurity landscape across the world. And it means that they're making decisions faster and faster, but also making the bigger decisions quicker than anybody else that's out there, which means the products tend to be at the high tier and as good as it gets. So as we go through, there is some third-party certifications, etc. we discuss, and we can touch on those pieces for you. So gone on here for the last stat as well. The USA, the UK, Germany, and Israel were the most targeted nations for cyber attacks in 2025. The USA, the UK being the kind of the big two, followed by Germany and Israel. And that's a significant trend difference versus 2024 when we saw this here. Purely from the perspective of Ukraine was obviously a significant attack victim in 2024, as was Israel as it's continued on there. But also we saw other ones such as the United Arab Emirates being another significant attack region for cyber criminals, etc. And obviously this change has obviously made things be looked at slightly differently, especially from the UK and Germany being added to this particular list of the most targeted nations globally in 2025. So if I carry on there for you, when it comes to obviously the risks and the concern factor, which was kind of the title, shall we say, for this particular section, there is a lot of instances where we see SMBs come with what is known as a false sense of protection. A lot of small and medium businesses think we're too small, cyber criminals don't care about us, they only go for the big targets, they only look to target the big enterprises. Think of the major attacks that you've seen out there recently, the Marks and Spencer's attacks, the Harrods attacks, Jaguar Land Rover being another significant one there. And what we tend to see in the data from the breach reports, etc., which are on the screen there, what the data, etc., tends to show here is that this actually couldn't be further from the truth. One of the significant traits that we did actually see was that we started to see nation-based actors. So you can think of these as cyber criminal groups, which are funded by a government organization, the likes of North Korea's, Iran's of the world, etc., they fund these criminal organizations to a degree, but they obviously need to be able to grow and continue doing what they're doing. And the way that means that they'll actually do this is by going away and targeting SMBs, the people that don't always invest in the best cybersecurity features and functionality. And as a consequence of that, it will basically mean that they become a potential target purely down to the lack of investment in security and these large enterprises that are government funded wanting to meet their quotas, because it's very important you don't see these cyber criminal groups as just being a couple of people sat in a basement that are going to try and blackmail someone from a ransomware attack. These are large organizations now that we're starting to see forming with sales targets, HR groups, sales managers, a whole host of departments, etc., that you would see in any normal enterprise. But we're seeing this now at scale with these large cyber criminal organizations. So again, it's really important that people invest in the products as an SMB in particular, so that they don't become the target of these larger organizations that can hit several MSB, small and medium businesses, versus a single enterprise account that they may or may not spend several months in trying to attack and breach their systems. There is also the rising and the unexpected costs of a cyber attack as well. So in some instances, you will see, let's say, for instance, I'm going to say a ransomware attack here, which is where somebody gets into your system and encrypts the data so you can't access it. And then will basically, in most instances, demand a sum of money from you to allow you to have your data back, in short. And what we tend to see in these sorts of scenarios is people will pay the ransom, they will get their data back. But in a lot of instances, you don't choose how that data comes back to you. You don't get to decide if it all just appears back where it was before. Often it will just come back to you on a memory folder and it'll go, there you go, you sort it out now. A lot of the time that data will be corrupt, so it's no longer usable for you. Or in some instances, it is so convoluted to try and reorganize that we tend to find a lot of businesses just can't recover from these sorts of issues. They don't have the capabilities to be able to restructure their data, but also the ability to come back from the fact that some of that data may be permanently lost, even if they've paid the ransom. This then leads on to a lot of other potential instances of damage to reputations, negative long-term effects from people no longer choosing to work with you due to that cyber attack that took place, due to your service outage or whatever that issue that may have arisen as a consequence of that. And the recent Marks and Spencer's attacks would be a prime example of that. I'm sure many of you will appreciate that the attack came from a third-party vendor, as you'll have read in the press. And what they did was they came through the small and medium business to attack the larger enterprise. So they weren't the actual target. They were just the attack vector to reach the bigger fish. And as a consequence of that, I'm sure you can imagine that Marks and Spencer's now potentially will not be doing business with that small enterprise any longer. And again, this will come with significant harm to the reputation and the financial earning opportunities of that small and medium business. And so again, damage to reputation, damage to future earnings, etc. And we tend to find that small businesses just can't come back from this in most instances. And then we've got the increasing operational challenge of it as well. So obviously security plays a critical role across nearly every business process, internally and externally, as it says on the screen there. But one of the pieces that we often have overlooked is that people will go, well, we've got this product that does this and this product that does that and another product which will do something else in terms of your security. So an email security solution may be different to your, your laptop's antivirus solution. And that may be different to the security you use on your mobile device, for example, and so on and so forth, basically. And as a consequence of that, you end up in a scenario where you're requiring your IT leads, your IT manager, or whoever that potentially is who looks after your estate, you're relying on them to be able to understand these multiple different systems, manage these multiple different relationships as well, and obviously the agreements and the contracts and everything else that comes with that as a consequence. Now, as we'll go through this, you'll see Business Premium offers a really good opportunity here for you to be able to consolidate that and act with a cost-saving driver to this as well. And that'll become apparent as we start delving into this a little bit more. But talking about Business Premium, And this is just stacking it up here against what's known as Business Basic and Business Standard, which I'm sure is what many of you on the call will have as your licensing model today. So I'm just going to touch on both of them really briefly, and then again, we'll touch on Business Premium, which is why we're here today. So Business Basic, everything that most businesses will need from a productivity and a collaboration perspective. The big drawback that comes when it comes to Business Basic falls down to the fact of your applications, so your Outlook, your Word, your Excel, and your PowerPoint are all web-based applications. So what that means is you have to access those applications through your web browser. So through Google Chrome, through Firefox, Edge, whatever it is that you choose to use personally. So when you open your PowerPoint, it opens up in your web browser. Now that comes with a significant drawback in the perspective of you have to have an active internet connection in order to be able to access those documents, because you need the web browser to be active to be able to do that. So really good example here is, I don't know if any of you have ever tried working on a train with an internet signal, and you've got absolutely no chance in most instances. So again, for people that work remotely or that are on the go with their job, etc., the Business Basic license comes with some drawbacks from that perspective, that people will often struggle to be collaborative and productive whilst they are traveling for work or while they're on their commute, whatever that may be. As you move up to Business Standard, that drawback comes away. You get on there your web and mobile applications included. So everything can be installed on the device, which means you can access that data and that information without the active internet connection, for the vast majority of your data that you'll have anyways. So that's brilliant, because it'll mean that you can work remote, work on the move, and it'll, save people a whole headache, shall we say, in trying to do that sort of thing. Now, you'll see on there, it says foundational security for both of these. And this is kind of the next piece I want to touch on here for you. A lot of instances of people being on Business Basic and Business Standard, they come with a misconception, really, that it includes a vast amount of security solutions. And it includes only the basics, the absolute basics that you can imagine. So it identifies it here as identity and access control. So an identity and access control system is literally giving you the capability for your username and passwords to be able to log into the system. You can have a basic version of what's called multi-factor authentication, which is when you'll have like a code that texts to your phone and you have to input that code, etc., to proceed through the system. That's an MFA method, basically. So it'll include things such as that. You then get what's known as Exchange Online Protection. So this is literally what most people see as, oh, we've got email security, and you very much don't have an email security solution. Exchange Online Protection is purely there, really looking for spam more than anything. So it's looking for anything that could drop in there that would be an en masse send from somebody who's a chancer, trying to get you to click on a link and purchase a particular, product, which is probably something mass produced somewhere in the world. And then last up, mobile device management. You get a very, very entry-level version of mobile device management, because devices can be assigned against individual people when they log into those devices. But, we won't touch on that one too much for you. So what I'm trying to get at there is very basic, very entry-level security aspects that are included there. Now, we talk about Business Premium, what we're here to talk about. And the reason we do that is because of that pink dotted box that I'm sure all of you have drawn your eyes towards, which gives us those 6 items, which are the pieces that we talk about the most. And to enlarge them and give you a bit of an overview on them here, you'll see first up we have Microsoft Entra ID, Microsoft Intune, Microsoft Defender, Purview, Azure Virtual Desktop, and last but not least, Defender for Office 365. And we're going to touch on what each of these does really briefly for you and why they're such an important part of the Business Premium license. And it's important to remember here that all these features and functions didn't used to come within Business Premium years ago. These were all features that were reserved for Microsoft's enterprise level customers. And what they've done over time is identified that SMBs are starting to be more heavily targeted for security, compliance, device management reasons, that they've started to filter those tools down into the SMB products and giving everybody else these additional features and capabilities. But as I said, we would do a bit of a feature rundown for you here on each of those as we're going. And first up on the block, we have something that's known as Microsoft Entra ID Plan 1. Now, there is the name Entra or Entra is a bit of a debated one. I don't think anybody actually knows, and even Microsoft themselves. So call it what you wish, we will know what you mean. But the Microsoft Entra ID Plan 1 that we have on here, and this comes back to what we spoke about earlier on, which was your multi-factor authentication. So again, I'm going to use a really rudimentary example here, but I'm sure many of you will have online banking. And when you log into your online banking for the first time, your bank will text you a code and say you have to input this 6-digit code that we've sent to your mobile phone. And you'll input that number along with a username and your password, and it will give you access to your mobile banking. Again, that's a very entry-level version of what we call multi-factor authentication. There is various other versions of that are available. Some of you will have what's known as Microsoft Authenticator, which is like an application on your phone, and it pops up on the screen with a 2-digit code, and then you put that 2-digit code into your mobile device. And again, it's just another way of doing it with an application, etc. But Microsoft Entra ID is what lets these advanced forms of multi-factor authentication come into the workplace. So it means that you're more protected than you would be with just the traditional methods, which can come under various different forms of attack and ways of getting around that. So you get advanced multi-factor authentication as a part of that. On top of that, it also starts to introduce something that we call passwordless technologies, which is where you would no longer log in with a password, which is something that can be guessed, which is something that can be given away as an intangible aspect. It starts bringing into the equation passwordless technologies where you only use MFAs as different ways of that, of your method of logging into the devices. So continuing there without getting too complicated, you also get at this point the ability to do what's known as self-service password reset, which means you're not relying on your IT manager or your MSP to do your password resets. You have the ability to, manage that piece for yourselves. And last but not least, you get 2 pieces here, which is called conditional access. Now, conditional access is an absolutely amazing set of tools which can detect and block potentially anywhere up to 99% of attacks as a part of your, let's say, identity protection suite here. So what conditional access does is it's actually dictating when you log into the system, whether you do or you don't MFA. So prime example of this would be, I'm sat here in the offices, and because it knows I'm in the office, it's not asking me to use multi-factor authentication. It knows where I am. I've provided my username and password, and it's comfortable with that. Yep, Mr. Graves, log into the system. We're very happy with you. However, I then pick my laptop up and I go sit in the coffee shop down the road, and all of a sudden it doesn't know where I am. So at that point, it may potentially tell me, you do have to MFA because now we don't know where you are. So are you who you say you are? We want to double check that. And again, you can have different scenarios set up for this sort of thing, where it could be that if you're outside of the UK, you always have to use MFA. Again, blocking off a huge potential attack vector here for you, because anybody outside of the UK now automatically needs to know your MFA details, your username, and your password to be able to get into the system. So again, that's coming with some significant requirements for anybody to be able to breach the systems there. So again, increasing your protection levels quite dramatically. And then the last one on there, sorry, I mentioned was Cloud App Discovery. And Cloud App Discovery is all around doing something that's known as shadow IT. And I will touch on that one specifically for you as we go through without delving into that in too much depth at this stage. So next up, we have here what's known as Microsoft Intune. So Microsoft Intune is all based around device management. So prime example here would be you've got 5 colleagues that all work from here, there, and everywhere, and they've all got corporate mobile phones. How do you currently manage those mobile devices? So if, let's say, John in finance jumped on the train for his morning commute and left that work phone on the train, how do you know that nobody would be able to access your corporate data on that device? It may even be a personal device with the work emails on it. How do you know that nobody's going to be able to pick that phone up, access all of the data on that, and have access to John from Finance's emails or his OneDrive or the corporate SharePoint account, for example? Again, it offers a significant potential attack vector, and it's something that's been targeted quite heavily in recent years. So again, the ability to be able to block that device remotely, lock the device, remote wipe it so that there's no sensitive data on it, means that you've potentially stopped any kind of data breaches for yourselves. Nobody wants to go reporting themselves to the GDPR police, shall we say, for example. And again, because the device is encrypted, because it's locked, it's wiped, it gives you the capabilities there to be able to, have that data control, have that data protection piece of your customers' data as a consequence of that. But it does more than that as well. It can also help with the setup of devices to make it more streamlined for new starters to be onboarded, and for the ability to update the devices as well. So if you don't want your corporate devices to be used for games, you can block that. You know, whether that be a phone, a laptop, an iPad, whatever it may be, you could have it so it's blocked so people can't go on it and play games. You could have it so that they can or can't use their cameras on the devices, for example. So it's a really granular level of control that Microsoft Intune will get you within your devices across your user base. So some pretty significant tools and features that become available there. Next up, we've got Defender for Business. Now, Defender for Business is pretty much a traditional antivirus solution. I'm sure many of you have bought a new laptop in years gone by, and it comes pre-installed with, let's say, McAfee, or it comes with Norton 360 on it, or something of that nature that's pre-installed on the device. Now, Defender for Business is basically a version of that, be it a far more advanced version of those solutions. And the reason we say it's a far more advanced version of these solutions is because that capital letters in that first sentence, you'll see where it says EDR, and that stands for Extended Detection and Response. And that's a really important piece to remember, because as we go through this, we'll touch on Defender for Business for you, and you'll understand exactly what that does. So it's going beyond just saying we're going to protect the device. It's then at the point where it's actually stopping the attacks before they come in, but also doing remedial work after the fact. So it's continuing the protection even after they've got into the system. And again, we'll touch on that in a little bit more depth shortly. We have Defender for Office 365, which is all aimed around your collaboration tools and your email protection. So I'm sure many of you have seen these email security solutions before, where you'll have a, kind of a link that comes in and you press on it and it says, no, you can't access that. This is what Defender for Office 365 does. And again, all of this built into that business premium license that we're talking about here. But it does some very, very niche parts of this. And, again, we'll touch on those as we go through. So you can kind of get an understanding of the product in working form, shall we say. And then last but not least, which is Microsoft Purview. Now, Microsoft Purview is probably the product I have spoken to customers about more than anything in the last 12 months. And it is a hugely underutilized set of tools, but people are seeing huge amounts of value in it now moving forward as well. And this comes into a number of products. So Purview is a family of products, but these products are all aimed around data protection, so stopping data from leaking, which we call DLP, data loss prevention. We also have parts of this which is called information protection, which is stopping that data if it leaves the business from being accessed by anybody, but also the ability to do things like email encryption, auditing work, legal holds and large searches for particular keywords when you have what's known as freedom of information requests that come in, requests for information, and so on and so forth. These are the sorts of tools that will help you massively with those types of labour-intensive aspects of the legal frameworks of the country, shall we say. Excuse me. So, as I said, we touch on some real-world examples here, and that'll allow us to discuss these products in a little bit more depth. Now, at this stage, if anyone does have any questions, do feel free to drop them into the Q&A for me, and I'll do my best to answer them as we're going through this particular stage. I can see on there Lee's just actually dropped a question, so I will pause for a moment and just answer that one for you, Lee. But it says, if you use a BYOD, so bring your own device, can you create a container on the personal device for work apps? If the user then loses the device or leaves the organization, only the container needs to be removed rather than wiping the whole device. So that's actually a really good question, Lee. And our upcoming scenario will go through that for us. So what I'll do is I'll hang on and I'll answer that question as we get to the next couple of slides, if that's okay, because it will represent that in an imagery form, which will make it far more easy for us to explain that. So starting on for you with Entra ID here, which is one of the ones we spoke about. And what we've done is we've segregated this into two pieces. The left-hand side you'll see here as a challenge. The right-hand side is the solution within the business premium product stack. So on the challenge section there, you'll be able to read that for yourself, but I will say Northwind traders, employees need access to their work data as they're working remotely. However, bad actors may try to gain access to work information by stealing passwords and trying to gain access to the work data from anywhere in the world. So, very much an example that we spoke about on the previous slide here, but this is where Entra ID would come into the equation with that conditional access piece that we discussed. So if in this scenario, Northwind Traders staff are working outside of the office, we could use conditional access in this scenario to say to them, if you're working outside of the office, you always have to use multi-factor authentication, which means they always have to provide two forms of identity to access the system. They have to input their password and they have to provide the code that's texted to them, the code that the application provides to them, or it could even be, in some instances, a little USB drive that they have to stick in with a fingerprint reader on the top. There's a whole host of different ways that can be done. Some of the other ones we're starting to see more and more now as the laptops of the world advanced is utilizing something called Windows Hello, which is facial recognition, or the fingerprint recognition tools that are actually built into the devices. So those little biometric sensors that are on, let's say, for instance, you've got a Mac, it's usually on your on and off key in the top corner, or for others, it's usually alongside your mouse key on your laptop. So you can use various different forms of MFA as a part of this. So when a user in this scenario from Northwind Traders tries to log into the system, I'm going to say from the airport because they're about to jump on a plane, it will ask them to MFA. So they provide their multi-factor authentication method and their password, and it lets them into the system, and then they can access the data and collaborate with their colleagues without any problems. However, complete flip side of that is we've now got a potentially malicious actor who's sat in a train station in, I don't know, Madrid, let's say, for instance, and they're trying to log into your systems now with malicious intention, but they have managed to gain somebody's username and password. They put the username and password in, attempt to log into the system. It's going to say, right, now you need to MFA because of the conditional access policy. And all of a sudden it's going, well, I've not got MFA, so I can't get into the system. And again, that username and password almost becomes completely useless to them as an individual because they don't have the multi-factor authentication method to get in there as well. So again, an attack vector has been completely blocked there from accessing your systems. So powerful set of tools. Those conditional access policies are very, very customizable. You can make it so only individual groups of people have to do MFA in different scenarios, etc. So again, carries a lot of capability there for you to get really granular with who, what, and when they need to use multi-factor authentication to log into the systems. Amazing. And now we've got the Intune one, which, as I said, brings back to Lee's earlier question about the whole bring your own device. So when we say bring your own device, this is what we call a personal device. So it could be my own personal mobile phone, for instance, and I bring it and use it for work purposes. So in a scenario where I start a new job and I've just started at GeoCom and I go, oh, I'm going to put my emails on my work phone, and I log into my work phone and put my emails on there. And then I put my OneDrive on it, and then I've got my Teams in there, and then all of a sudden I've got my PowerPoint presentations in there. At this point, we hit a period where the data becomes a potential leak data breach, as we mentioned before, in the eventuality that I left the business or lost the device, as the scenarios that Lee had given there in the chat. Now, what you do as a part of Intune is, on somebody's personal device, it segregates it into two pieces, as you're seeing on the screen here. Personal apps at the bottom, managed applications at the top there. So in the event that we're sat in here and I decide, actually, I'm leaving GeoCom and I go away to work for a competitor, when I leave the business, the IT team will be able to remotely wipe just the corporate data from this device. So as Lee said, to answer his question, yes, you can wipe just the corporate data from the device and leave all of the personal data behind with no issue whatsoever. In short, Microsoft Intune can't access personal data on a device. It only has the capability of accessing the corporate data and the corporate applications that it identifies and it cares about. So it protects everything that's important to the business and can see nothing else. It can't see and it doesn't care about your photos. It can't see and it doesn't care about your messages, your social media feeds. Everything of that nature is completely personal to you and cannot be accessed in any way, shape, or form by the business on your device. So it's very much a firewall that's in place, protecting the two entities and keeping them separate. There is how you can look at that. So what I am going to do now, though, is give another scenario that we've got on the screen here with the challenge of our Northwind Traders company again. And their new marketing manager is using her personal phone to check on the company emails. And she receives, as a part of that, a confidential business plan. And she accidentally saves that confidential business plan to the personal storage on her device. So she's took it out of that corporate area that we were speaking about a moment ago, that managed apps box at the top, and she saved it in the personal storage on the phone. Could be a personal storage, it could be her own personal OneDrive or her own personal Dropbox account, whatever it may be. They've saved that outside of that corporately protected area. So all of a sudden that data, in the event she leaves, can be accessed by anybody. So the way of fixing that as a part of Intune would be what is known as an app protection policy. In this instance is what we call it. And what that will basically do is say anything that comes out of that corporate box, such as the confidential business plan attachment on the Outlook, could only be saved inside of the corporate area and framework. So when we do attempt to save that into our own personal storage, the app protection policy within Intune would block that action from happening. It would not allow us to save it outside of the corporate area. So you'll see on this arrow here, when that file with a little lock there comes on from the top, goes all the way down the line to save into the bottom area, the personal, you'll see it's getting that blocked sign. It can't do that. However, going back up there and saving it into our own personal OneDrive, our SharePoint that we use for work, etc., that's absolutely no problem at all. That is keeping it safe inside the corporate framework. And as a consequence of that, we will allow that action to take place. So again, stopping a potential data breach, because if they did leave the business, they could have taken that documentation with them to a competitor, or it could have been something less malicious and they've left it on the train. Somebody's got onto the phone and all of a sudden they've got access to an entire list maybe of 30 customers and all of their financial data that comes with that. So again, it's blocking a potential avenue of attack there. And then next up, we have Defender for Office 365. So as we spoke about earlier, this is the email and the collaboration security aspect that we're talking about here. And again, we've got our Northwind Traders employee there on the left-hand side. And that Northwind Traders employee receives an email in with a link on that email. So they think it's come from a very ordinary user. They don't recognize anything wrong with the email. It's the sort of thing they get on a regular basis. They click on the link. The link asks them to put their username and password in, which is what they'd expect it to do. And they type the username, they type their password in, but nothing happens. It just times out. So they think no more about it and think, oh, that must be a glitch. I'll come back to that later on. What they've actually done is just typed their username and password into a system, which is basically just given that over to an attacker. So they now have the employee credentials to log into the system. Again, it's a significant part of being able to get in through like a password breach style attack. So now they've got the username, now they've got the passwords, etc., that they've taken away with them. The attacker then potentially has access to your sensitive information, your sensitive files, or even worse than that, they're going to take that username and password and potentially 4 or 5 other colleagues that may have fallen for the same trick, and they're going to go sell it on the dark web. And your details are going to be given to somebody with potentially far more malicious intentions, or with more, should we say, more tools, more capabilities at their disposal to attack you in various different ways and means. Solution to that, though, with Defender for Office 365, in most instances, the email probably wouldn't have got through in the first place because of that initial scan that takes place by Microsoft before the email is even delivered. But in the eventuality that that email did get delivered and it did turn up at your inbox, it has a couple of products in there which are able to stop these sorts of attacks from taking place. So we mentioned email came in with a link on it and they pressed on the link. Now, what Microsoft Defender does is use something that we call safe links. And what safe links does is every single time you press on a link, it will open that link, check it in a, let's call it a sandbox environment, a Faraday cage, however you like to imagine it. It's opening it in that isolated environment, checking it is exactly what it should be before it then presents it to you and says, yes, that's safe, or no, you can't access that, in which case you'd get something very similar to what you see in that pink box there with that big red cross icon on the shield there. So it will prevent you moving further with that link because it views it as malicious. So you wouldn't get to the opportunity of typing your username and password in. The other piece of that is something that's known as safe attachments. So if it was an email that came in with a malicious attachment rather than it being a link, it would provide the same sort of service. Open that attachment in a sandboxed environment, check the attachment, make sure there's nothing in there that's malicious or carries malicious intention once it's opened, and then it will say yes or no to you for opening that particular attachment. And you've got to think this is all done in tenths of a second with this opening, checking, and giving you the level of access that you need. So there's nothing that's going to hold anybody up while they wait for something to be checked. This is all done in, as I say, tenths of a second, click your fingers and it's done style scenarios. Obviously, this requires a significant amount of AI-powered checks that take place. A lot of anti-spoofing checks take place and things as well, looking for people that are doing like impersonation style attacks, pretending to be the CEO of the business and asking you to order £500 worth of Amazon vouchers for a giveaway that he's doing, that sort of thing as well, is what it will look for within its core searches and scans. So again, very comprehensive set of tools here with it. And as you'll see, gives you the ability to check links, attachments. And the other important thing is as well is it doesn't just come through email. These links and these attachments can come via your collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams. They could send those links and those attachments via Teams and intend on, impersonating your service desk, or it could be your managing director or whoever it is within the business. So again, various different ways that can kind of happen, but very comprehensive set of tools to protect you there against these sorts of attacks. And then next up, we have on here a piece of the Purview family of products. So this is something that we call information protection that we're looking at here. And again, I'm going to talk you through this scenario, but we call this Purview, but it is just a piece of the Purview family. This is a far larger family of products that carry different capabilities. But just to give one aspect of this with information protection for you here. So information protection. So Northwind Traders sometimes uses password protection on an Excel spreadsheet. I'm sure many of you will have seen that before. You put a password on it, you can type the password in and gain access to the device. These passwords that Northwind Traders are using, though, are very sporadic. They're not consistent. Sometimes they're on a document, sometimes they're not. But also the other issue is every employee knows the passwords for these documents, which means that if the employee leaves and takes the document with them, they still know the password, they can still access the document. So in our scenario here, the employee that you see on the left-hand side there has accessed the sensitive file. They've saved it onto a USB stick, and then they've basically left the business, no longer employed, and taken that USB stick with them with that sensitive information on the particular document. So they take it home, plug it into their laptop when they get home. They still know the password for that Excel spreadsheet, so they type it in, and great, we've got access to the whole sales plan for Northwind Traders for the next year. And oh yeah, by the way, I'm now working at a competitor, so we've given them access to all of that information as well. Potentially significant commercial security breach there, if not a wider breach of potential customer data and information as well. So utilizing information protection within Microsoft Purview would stop that type of thing from happening. So what information protection will allow you to do is create what we call a label. And you can apply a label to any document and any email that you wish. And that label is dictated into different areas that you create in your initial setup of this solution. So you can have like available to anybody. So anybody, anywhere, anytime can open it. You could have something that's marked as internal only. So only your internal staff can access it. And there might be something that's marked up as highly confidential, in which case only maybe yourself and a select cohort of others can access that particular information and data. And this isn't done by using passwords. This is done by using your username and password login credentials to access this. So if you're not logged into your corporate Microsoft account, you can't access these documents. So going down to our scenario again here, when the employee opened up that document, saved it onto the USB stick, took that home and plugged it into their personal laptop, and then proceeded to try and open that particular Excel document, all of a sudden, because it was marked as internal only or highly confidential, they can't access it. They no longer have corporate account information. So because they no longer have a corporate login and a company login details, they can't access that document. It's basically just become a paperweight because it's heavily encrypted and they can no longer access that data and that information. And as I said, this can apply against anything from emails all the way through to a PowerPoint presentation, an Excel spreadsheet, a Word document, whatever it is you're creating, you can apply these labels against them and ensure that that data is protected, whether it's on your laptop or it ends up slipping out of the system and being installed and being available on somebody else's laptop through USB sticks, so on and so forth. Now, this is obviously the first level, shall we say, in terms of data protection that starts to come in here. There is a whole host of other products that come in, allowing for a lot of capability when it comes to people's compliancy requirements for the industry, with the ability to do things like legal searches, request for information acts, as we said before, putting information into legal hold settings, and also what we call data loss prevention as well, which is all around preventing any data from leaking in the first place. Let's think here, credit card numbers, passport numbers, names, addresses, company details. It can automatically detect that type of information and block it from leaking outside of the business. So some really, really powerful capabilities in the Purview family. And if you are in a heavily regulated sector, really recommend you reaching out to the team at your IT department and letting them go through the whole Purview stack with you and all of that incredible capability that comes with it. And it also has a compliancy portal as well. So it can help you identify what you need to have turned on to be compliant within your particular industry, within your particular geography. And again, that has thousands and thousands of industry and global regulations built into that reports portfolio from Microsoft. So again, powerful set of tools, and really recommend you digging into that if you are in a regulated industry in any way, shape or form. Next up, we have got on here, which is going to show us Defender for Business, which is all around a ransomware attack. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to skip past this because the next one shows us it a little bit better, shall we say, when I wanted to talk about that EDR, so that extended detection and response aspect from earlier on. So, as we said, Defender for Business is literally your traditional style antivirus solution. We'll say it's on steroids because it goes so much further than that. So we start off here with next generation protection in the middle. That piece in the middle there, that is your core antivirus solution. The pieces to the left of that and the pieces to the right of that is where Microsoft Defender takes this a step further versus other solutions. So if I start on the left and we'll work our way to the right and go through each of these pieces individually. But the easiest way for me to be able to describe this for you is looking at it from the perspective of building security. You imagine this is your building with that dotted line running around the outside, or your laptop, shall we say, as the building, and we can kind of talk it through. So threat and vulnerability management on the left-hand side. I want you to imagine this being like almost like a building inspector for you, a building instructor, however you want to look at it. They're going to walk around the building, look at the windows, look at the doors, make sure the wall hasn't fallen down. It's doing that sort of work on your laptop. It's making sure that the potential entry points of this don't have any threats or vulnerabilities in play. So that'll be doing things like making sure that we're up to date on the latest the latest updates of Windows 11 with our operating system, and checking various things of that nature, just to make sure that there's no easy ways for people to be able to get into that system. We then have what's known as the attack surface reduction piece in here. So attack surface reduction is making sure the windows are locked in your building, for example, and only the right people have access to the keys. So it's all about minimizing risk by plugging the gaps, shall we say, slightly on those areas that we've identified as part of the threat and vulnerability aspect. So it's all about minimizing the entry points into your device as a part of that. It then takes us on to next generation protection. Look at this like the lock on the front door. It's blocking all of those traditional types of attacks, file-based attacks, fileless, malware, spyware, all that sort of thing is what it's physically blocking and holding back for you. Now, in the eventuality that something does get into the system, this is where the next steps, which is endpoint detection and response and auto investigation and remediation, come into the equation. So endpoint detection and response would be the equivalent of a security system. Sensors, cameras, alarms. It's automatically creating a notification system to identify something malicious is in the system. Here's where it is. And we obviously now need to take action to box it in, stop it doing it, stop it spreading to anybody else's device or any of the other systems that we have. So this is all about alerting you that it's there and starting to look at what actions need to be taken to stop it in its tracks. That then leads us on to the auto investigation and remediation aspect. So this is like your alarm system. It's calling the authorities to remove the intruder as well as fixing the gap that they came in from. So it's blocking them, stopping them. You can kick them out, but we're going to box them into such an area where they can't do anything, and we're going to fix how they got in the first place to make sure that there's nobody else coming in behind them. Or we're not going to see a repeat attack 24, 48, 72 hours later as a part of that. So it's patching behind itself, in short. So this is basically acting almost like a start to finish, from protecting you before they get in, stopping the attack, but then taking action afterwards, acting like a security analyst, automating the investigation alerts, the remediation of these complex threats, basically, is what it's doing. So it's acting as the entire start to finish process here. The only way you can take this any further, really, is to start bolting additional security aspects onto this. Or the other piece would be bolting on something that's known as an MDR solution, which is a managed detect and response. And what that basically would do is, at the point that this starts alerting the authorities that somebody is in the system, that would start to alert a 24/7, 365 security operations centre, where you would then have a human looking over this from somewhere in the UK. And like I say, that would be middle of the night. Let's say it's 1 o'clock in the morning and they get that alert. It automatically means that a human has eyes on that as soon as it happens. So again, that's the only way you're going to take solutions like this even further from an endpoint protection perspective. Amazing. And then just to touch on Microsoft's security credentials here really quickly for you. So as it says on here, these are all third-party tests that have been done. 6 out of 6 was scored by the AV test on its protection scores. It got 99.7% from AP Comparative, the AAA award from the SE Labs, and MITRE Industries gave it basically industry-leading capabilities and optics as its kind of definition of the Defender product stack. So hugely capable set of products. And if we move on to what's known as the MarketScape from IDC, you'll see size of dot indicates market share, followed by capabilities and strategies on your X and Y axis there for it. And you'll see Microsoft sitting pretty right up there with that ready coloured bubble at the top of it, seen as industry leaders versus a lot of significant cybersecurity focused companies of the world, such as your CrowdStrikes, Trend Micro is another one, Trellix, SentinelOne, WatchGuard, and so on and so forth. So again, highly significant set of capabilities that Microsoft have got. And that comes back to the stats we looked at the very beginning. They have a huge environment to Microsoft, and that gives them a lot of capability to be able to see all of these data points, all of this security data, and it gives them such a big landscape that nobody else has, that it basically means that they're making decisions faster than anybody else, which again in turn means that the products are more secure, the products tend to be more developed and integrated into the wider Microsoft ecosphere as a consequence of that. Amazing. And then just to kind of wrap things up for you all here then with the last couple of slides, a recap on exactly what we've just gone through in terms of a summary for you. Comprehensive set of solutions is Microsoft from the perspective of your productivity and collaboration aspect. Creating a very very intertwined ecosystem, not just of these security pieces we've just gone through and the data pieces, but also of all of those collaboration tools and the productivity tools that are available. There's very few businesses in the world that I come across that don't use Teams and don't use Outlook. And the fact that you could be so heavily intertwined with your OneDrives and SharePoints and your security solutions means it's pretty unparalleled in terms of capabilities there and the adoption piece of that. Cost effectiveness, we're going to touch on that a little bit more in the next slide for you all. And then touching on what we call enterprise grade security. So top rated security vendor, comprehensive set of tools. And as I mentioned earlier on, the bits we went through today, this was purely what was available to enterprise level customers previously. So we're talking 300 plus coming onto 1,000 user environments. We're using the tools that Microsoft have now identified and brought down for SMBs to be able to use in recent years. And I will touch on that cost effectiveness piece for you all here. It does say on here about the price of the business premium and the price of the others. What I will say to you is this pricing does depend on monthly commitments, annual commitment models, billing models that you go for, etc. There's a whole host of things that kind of tweak your pricing up and down within a couple of pound of each other, shall we say. But to kind of put it into perspective here, if you bought everything separately that we've been through today, plus your productivity collaboration tools, etc. So we'll be looking at things like Google for your productivity tools. You'd be looking at like the products called like Octa and CrowdStrike and things like that. You'd be about £33 per user per month. Versus the business premium solution, which will work out approximately £18 per user per month. So the idea here being is it's all around do more with less, making the most of those licenses, those users, and the opportunity that's available to you. And that is everything I had to share with you all today. It looks like we're pretty much bang on time by a couple of minutes for any questions that anybody has. But if there's no questions that crop up, Craig, I'll hand back to you. And thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, nothing in the Q&A, so we'll give people 3 minutes of their time back. Thanks very much for that, James. Really interesting stuff in there. We did answer in the chat earlier on. There'll be a recording of this available, and we will send an email out with that. It'll take me a couple of days just to format the video properly and get it on a web page and that kind of thing. So early part of next week, there'll be a link available to watch this again, should you wish to, or wish to show it to anybody else in the organisation. But thank you very much, and yeah, we'll finish there. Thank you all.
Thanks again, everybody.
Cheers. I just noticing some people are typing, so I'm just going to wait until they're finished. It's all nice, thank you. So that's good. I'll let them do those. Thanks very much, everybody. Cheers. Bye.